You may not have heard much about TemTem, but if you haven't, it's looking like the Pokemon game fans have dreamt of. We're going to go over a lot of stuff about the game, from gameplay to hype, because it goes into beta today.
We do it for the fans.
What's going on, YouTube? It is Justin here with the Den of Nerds Gaming. Let's just get this out of the way now. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. Blow up social media with us specifically. Now that the spiel is done, let's move on to today's topic, TemTem. So Den of Nerds faithful, I will forgive you if you haven't heard much about TemTem, because I had to dig to learn about TemTem myself. So we're going to go over a heap of stuff announced for the game up until today, and if it sounds interesting to you, then you'll actually be able to check it out on Steam right after you're done watching this video. This monster collecting RPG is pretty much destined to be compared to Pokemon, since, well, the developers have kind of launched it as a direct competitor to that behemoth franchise. But the big difference here is that TemTem is online. Not just like Pokemon Sword and Shield, kinda sort of online, but a full-fledged MMO that will allow you to interact with all of your friends in real time. TemTem is the wonderful result of a successful Kickstarter actually coming to fruition. With $500,000 raised, small indie studio Crema is actually delivering on their promise. Unlike some certain Kickstarters I've funded in the past. Specifically, the Unsung Story. I'm never getting the Unsung Story, am I?
こんにちは、松野です。アンサングストーリーを楽しみにしている皆さん、今回僕はプロジェクトのゲームデザインをまず原案を出しておりまして、これをサンディエゴのスタジオの皆さんが作ってくれるという、そういう形で関わっています。あとこのゲームのために新たな世界観、新たな物語を作っておりますので、ぜひとも楽しみに待っててください。
Anyway, let's move away from my crippling depression at not getting a Final Fantasy Tactics reimagining and go back to TemTem. Battles in this are designed fairly differently from Pokemon. For starters, every battle in TemTem is a 2v2 battle. I get that competitive Pokemon does this, but hasn't really done it from the ground up in the beginning for all of its battles. TemTem does that. Obviously, this 2v2 design is set for the multiplayer functionality the game has been designed for since the beginning. So you actually are going to need to figure out what TemTem work well together and build your teams around this synergy. Because yes, every TemTem helps every other TemTem be a better TemTem. I'm going to be saying TemTem a lot more. TemTem, I did it again, is also offering some similar features to Pokemon with both trading and breeding as well. In featured trailers, the game has specifically mentioned that breeding is going to be a very important aspect, with Endgame seeming as though it entirely depends on it to effectively maximize your team. Not only will breeding give your TemTem increased stats and special moves they wouldn't get otherwise, but there are also some TemTem that you can only get through breeding. This seems super neat to me as a person who spends most of their Pokemon endgame working on breeding for the sake of breeding. And if and when I try TemTem out, I'm excited to see just how much of an edge actively engaging in TemTem breeding will give me in their weekly challenges. Yes, indeed, there are weekly challenges, and TemTem seems like it's promising players a lot of stuff to do actively in the endgame, something I know is pretty contentious in the Pokemon community with how previous Pokemon games have handled their endgames. But endgame is absolutely necessary in an MMO, and that is the key difference. You need an endgame to keep your players playing so they can hang around until you release your next batch of content, and then they need to keep playing through that content till you hit the next batch, rinse and repeat. TemTem is offering a lot of that in the competitive player aspect with ranked battles and all that, but we've also got offerings for the more casual player as well. Now, apparently the endgame area is going to provide players with a weekly rotating stock of TemTems. You'll be able to catch different ones in this area. And also in this endgame area, you are going to have an increased chance to catch shiny TemTem. Yes, shinies are coming back and making an appearance in TemTem, but unlike Pokemon, your shiny TemTem has naturally better stats than all of the other ones. So if you've been upset in the past about getting a shiny Pokemon only to find its stats and abilities are absolute trash, then maybe TemTem is more of the game for you shiny hunters out there. TemTem is, of course, promising to offer players more beyond the battling, the breeding, the hunting, and all of that other stuff you would expect in a typical monster catching game. Players are going to have full customization of their TemTem trainer, clothing, hairstyles, the whole shebang. But players will also be able to buy a house in TemTem and decorate it to their heart's content. So, if you need an Animal Crossing fix before that magnificent game ends up hitting in March, TemTem has you covered, with a little bit of Pokemon on the side. Overall, my friends, and I've got to be honest here, I really do hope TemTem is a magnificent success for a couple of reasons. Now, of course, we have those Pokemon fans out there who were burned by Sword and Shield and didn't want to buy it. While I don't really understand or sympathize with their mentality behind it myself, I still really would like that group of people to have an alternative game that they can play and have a lot of fun in. And if TemTem can provide that to them, that would be magnificent. On top of that, I think that a decent amount of competition would be good for Pokemon. Really, the only competition I can personally think of right now are the Digimon Cyber Sleuth games, and even then, those aren't nearly as massive as Pokemon by comparison. More competition could lead to some better Pokemon games with better systems and more player-friendly design down the line, and I would be really, really okay with that. On top of that, more than anything, Pokemon's only on a Nintendo console. TemTem is on PC, and it's going to be multi-platform. So if you don't own a Switch and want to get some sort of Pokemon fix, then I'd be really happy if you could have an option available to you.
This is where the fun begins.
Now, if you like the words that I've been speaking to you and you are interested in trying out TemTem, you can actually check it out on Steam right now. It's $35 to get into the early access version of the game, which is going to launch with 80 TemTem and promises at least 20 hours of story content. So if anything I said entices you, go ahead, give it a try, and let me know what you actually thought of the game down below. Seriously, gang, I'm really, really hoping this game succeeds. We need that competition against Pokemon. As I always say, hope you're all having an awesome and nerdy day, and I will see you all in our next video.